Hello, everyone. The Gemara in Bava Kama, page 66, is opening a window into a long and wide discussion in Judaism in terms of the relationship between a thought and an action, and how much do we need a thought together with an action, and what is more important, the intention, the thoughts that we have, or what we actually do in reality. So let me share the pages and let's look inside. The Gemara is, Abaya is looking into turning into Rav Yosef, and he says, I think that leathers that in the house, that the owner of the leathers, of the house is thinking to use them as is and not do anything special with them. That means that they gmar melacha. This is their purpose, and that's why they can be impurity on them. And I brought you some explanation, and let's start with that and move on. So hides and leathers are susceptible to contracting impurity only if they are in a finished state. Only a kli which is in a finished state can contract impurity. So when a person thought, only in his thought, he thought they are completed, then they can become impure. But if he's thinking, no, I have this piece of leather, I want to use it to do something else, then it's not finished yet, and therefore it's not gonna can contract impurity. If a private individual uses a piece of hide or leather for a certain purpose, as a cot or a tabletop, and decides that this will be its fixed purpose, it is considered as a finished product, and it's susceptible to contracting impurity. So what we learn from here is, even if it's only in the thought of the person, it's not done in reality yet. He didn't do anything with it yet, but he just thought that this is what he will do with those pieces of leathers. Then his thought has a lot of weight. They considered as if it's done. It's a done deal. And the whole questions of thoughts and actions in Judaism has to do with both halacha and philosophy and Jewish thinking of what is more important. Either do we have to understand and think well, and afterwards we'll do the right actions, or first we need to do what is right to do, even if we don't understand it, and then the thinking will come after. And I want to show you, it is a big topic. I want to show you few interesting thoughts about it. But I want to start with Torah, because in Parashat Noach, we hear that God sees that the human wickedness on earth is so great, and that Yetzer Machshavot Libo rak kol hayom, and every plan devised by human minds was nothing but evil all the time. In other words, they're not just doing evil, they're also thinking about evil all the time. And that was the reason why Mabul, why the flood came. In other words, it's not only deeds, and it's not only thoughts, it's both deed and thoughts that are so severe that that was the reason for the Mabul. And thinking evil, machshavot ra'ot, thinking evil, is something that we're familiar with at the rest of the books of Tanakh. And I brought one example in the book of Proverbs, that the sage there says, To'avat Hashem machshavot ra, evil thoughts are an abomination to the Lord, but pleasant words are pure. So the one simple way of understanding it, that God likes that the mind and the words to be the same. In other words, I have good thoughts, this is how I'm going to talk. I have bad thoughts, this is also going to in fact impact the way that I speak, and the way that I behave in this world. And God God doesn't like bad thoughts, because bad thoughts means that the person is very close to do also bad actions. That's one way of understanding it. But there's also a philosophical way of understanding it, that the evil thoughts um, are really distancing people from God. And if the purpose of the mitzvot, if the purpose of learning Torah is becoming closer to God, then when we are engaged in evil thoughts, that is distancing us from God, and that is hateful. That is an abomination in the eyes of God, and therefore we have to make sure that we're not engaged in thinking and thoughts that are deriving us further away from God. And obviously, if we're engaged in good deeds and good thoughts and pure words, that will bring us closer. That will bring us closer to God. In other words, there is a lot of weight in terms of only the thoughts. Our thoughts can really influence the way that we behave, the way that we are in this world. And that's why we need to keep away, from evil thought entering our mind. And in the halachic way, I would say, Chazal are saying in Masechet Yoma, hirhurei avera kashu me'avera. Thoughts of transgression are worse than the transgression itself, and which is a very surprising thing to think, right? Because when you transgress, that's a bad thing. Why the thoughts of transgression are worse than the transgression itself? And here the Gemara is bringing an example for us to understanding a mnemonic. Okay, and your mnemonic is the odor of meat. Now, what does that mean, the odor of meat? And the Gemara understand that sometimes just the odor, the smell of a good meat is more desirable to us than the meat itself. Like, it's just the odor that is pulling us towards that meat, and it's not necessarily that we need that meat. In other words, we are giving away or giving up to this sensation, and sometimes it's much stronger than the thing itself. The other example that the Gemara gives um, is that at the end of the summer is more oppressive. The heat of the end of the summer is more oppressive than the heat of the summer itself. In other words, everything is already warm and hot, and like everything is absorbed by the heat of the summer. And then that's why at the end is like there's no cool area anymore. And the other example that the Gemara gives is like a stove, and after an oven has been heated several times in the course of a day, lighting it again, even slightly, will produce powerful heat. So too at the end of the summer, since everything is hot, the heat is more oppressive. So what's the connection to the hirhu wave, to the thoughts of transgression? So says the Gemara that when a person is preoccupied with the transgression, with the sin, thinking about it all the time, all the time, all the time, from all different directions, when it comes to the action, it's much bigger and wider and deeper than if he just wants to sin and moves on during his day. In other words, dwelling with the thoughts of the sin and the preoccupation of the sin, the hirhurei avera, makes the sin itself much bigger, much harder we're getting to do it. And even if we're not doing it at the end, but just but sat and put ourselves in the midst of these thoughts, and it's cutting all our minds and thinking, and we can't think of anything else. And this is even worse than just doing that one time transgression. And different ways of understanding it in the Rishonim are very interesting. For example, Haran Rabbeinu Nissim from Spain at the beginning of the 14th century, one of the important Rishonim, and the Ran is saying, it thus emerges that thought in divine service and fulfillment of mitzvot is the fruit of mitzvot and the source of the divine service. In other words, says the Ran, what the purpose of the mitzvot is that we'll get closer to God. Um, and the corresponding the thought root in transgression is the root of rebellion. In other words, if we are engaged in thoughts of transgression, then it's going to lead to rebellion, which means to keep away from God, to get away from God. And this is the intent of the statement of our sages: thoughts of transgression are worse than the transgression itself. In other words, because when we transgress, when we do a sin that one time and we're done, we're finished, we're moving on, um, that's one thing. But where we're engaged in thoughts of transgression, then it can also create a feeling or thoughts of rebellion against towards God or against God, and that will keep us away from God instead of getting us closer to God. And that's why Hurhurei Avera are worse than the Avera itself. Here I wrote down Nefesh HaChaim, Rav Chaim of Volozhin. I'll just tell you what he says. And Rav Chaim is taking it to a different realm. And he says, the punishment of two people who did the same transgression, who did the same sin, is different because it all depends on the thought. One person did the sin with one thought, and another person did the same with a different thought, and that will get a different punishment because the one who is more whose intent was to sin, his desire want to sin, he become in love with the sin that he's doing, of course his punishment will be bigger than the one who just happened to sin because this is what he desired for this specific moment, but not because he believes in it or he think greatly on it or he find reason for himself why it's okay to sin. The punishment is dependent on the thought. But I want to move into to talking about good thoughts. I mean, so far we just touched bad thoughts, and of course there's so much more to say about it. But I do want to show a different idea in terms of good good thinking of Machshava Tova. And the Talmud Yerushalmi, we find it also in Masechet Kiddushin. The Talmud Yerushalmi is saying the Holy One praised him adds good intentions to deed. Okay, metzaref machshava lemaaseh. In other words, when we have a good thought of something to do, again, and when we didn't do it yet, God is pretending, or God takes into account that we actually did the good deed that is resulting from the good thought. In other words, two things here are important. It's not just a good thought, it's not just a good intention about life. It's good intentions about life, or a good thought about life that I can do something about it in reality and change the world to the best. And here God is saying, the Talmud is saying, when I have this thought that I want to do something for the world, or want to do something for my neighbor, or even I want to do something good for myself, for the benefit of myself, and I'm still not doing it because of many reasons, God is going to pretend or make as if I already did that, and I get a sachar of as if I did that action. But to the other side, Ken, the Holy One praised, he does not add the bad intention to deed. But if I have bad thoughts, God is not going to use it against me, and he's not going to pretend like I just had a bad thought. Oh, it's as if I actually did that bad thing. So it's a different way. It's different. It's actually even opposing what we heard right up to here. Maybe it's a difference between halacha and thought, and halacha and thought, but I actually think it's two different approach to that really big argument that we have in Judaism. Like, what's the weight of a thought, and can we consider a thought to be something real, or we need to see action in order to consider the initial thought as something positive. And the Talmud here in Yerushalmi is actually hinting to us that a good thought is really nice, but really what we need to make effort to is to do it in reality, to act on it. If we didn't, God consider it to be done, but we should definitely be the ones who would do it. And in regard to that, I want to show you a beautiful piece that Kada Kemach, who is Rabbi Rabbeinu Bechayei ben Asher, we mostly know him as a parshan on Chumash, but he also has a philosophical or a book of thought called Kada Kemach. And there, Rabbeinu Bechayei is quoting the famous pasuk in Tehillim Nun Aleph, Lev tahor brali Elohim, they create a pure heart for me, God, and renew a proper spirit within me. And Rabbeinu Bechayei is saying that King David is asking God to purify his thoughts. In other words, David understands that the only way that he can also do good in this world, that he will have good thoughts, and as a result of his good thought, of his pure thoughts, then he'll be able to do good thoughts in reality. And if he'll have, God forbid, bad thoughts, that can cause him to avera, that can cause him to do evil or bad things in the world. So he asks God for help in that. Why do we need help from God in that? Because we know how difficult it is to control our thoughts. And well, today we have meditations, we have different kinds of techniques that are helping us to try to control our thoughts, but it's really, really difficult. So King David is asking God to help him, to have a purity of thought. And it is known that this is an intellectual aspect. And Rabbeinu Bechayei is saying a thought is an intellectual aspect of a person's life. For all aspects are divided into two parts, the intellectual and the physical. And the physical ones correct the actions for their correct the actions, for there is no completeness of wisdom without correction of actions. In other words, Rabbeinu Bechayei in Kada Kemach is telling us good thoughts are really nice, but what we really need in the world is good actions. The only thing that will change the world is taking our good thoughts and moving them and turning them into action in this world. And that's how we change the world. By the way, that's how we change ourselves. If I have a good thought, if I think I can do something and it's a good thing for me, like prevent eating something bad, but it stays only in theory and I'm not acting on it, then it doesn't gonna make any change in my life. And that's what Kada Kemach is. That's what Rabbeinu Bechayei is saying. He's saying everything has two aspects. Has the intellectual, the sichli aspect, and it has the physical, the gufani aspect of a thing. And when David is asking for a good thought, what he really means is that I'll have the idea of how to do things, but then I need to make an effort to make it in the world, to do the actual thing, which is the completion of an intellectual of a good idea. And as it is written, good wisdom for all those who perform them. כן? שכל טוב לכל עושיהם, says also in Tehillim. And the rabbis explain that this applies not to those who study them, not שכל טוב לכל לומדיהן. You'll have good wisdom if you learn, but you'll have good wisdom if you'll perform them. So different aspect, different understanding of thought. But the bottom line is, if we have a good thought, if we have a good idea, don't keep it only theoretical. Act on it in the world. You'll change, and the world will change for the best as a result of that.